Take your CJ7 all the way to 11. Jeepin' with cool guy.
Now we're getting serious. We're going to take off the back end of the transmission. To do that, we got to unhook a couple of the components that are tying into either the rear drum brakes or the actual axle itself. We also need to take off the parking brake cable that connects to both of the brake shoes. So let's start with the parking brake and get that unhooked, and then we can move on to the rest. The main part of the parking brake that we need to take off or disconnect really is just these two pins in here. Take out the two cotter pins that hold those two pieces in, and then from there are support clamps that holds the cable into the support. We've already disconnected the parking brake from the front part when we actually took the body off, so the tension on this has already been released. If you haven't gotten to that point, or if you're just taking this off with the body on, you pretty much have to loosen up the tension by releasing these screws that hold this C bracket in place. Just pull those out. These are support pieces that hold it in there. Then you need to take off the cotter pins that hold the cables into the C bracket. Two cotter pins, two tension clamps. Pop that ball out, and then you have your parking brake disconnected. So you can disconnect this from the front part if you want, but for now, what we're doing with the back axle, we're just disconnecting these two cables. And those easily pull through just like that. Wanted to show you the grand landscape of all the hoses and pipes that are running to and fro across back here. Essentially, these three main here are fuel lines. So this one goes out to your actual engine fuel pump. These are vapor return and fuel return lines. This one right here happens to be the brake line. This goes through this little holding bracket that's connected to this cross member. You need 2 wrenches. You need a 5/8 for the big piece, and you need a 3/8 for the small one. And all you need to do is just disconnect these two, pull that out. I've got this really funny feeling that there might be some brake fluid in here. I'm going to get a towel. That's better. Scrap towel, scrap cup. So we get, oh, and I'm also putting on a glove, protective glove for this piece, just because brake fluid is not the best thing in the world to get onto your hands, and yet there, sure enough, is some brake fluid. Disconnect those two. This is not the most coordinated event I've ever done. From what I can tell, it's pretty easy. So I'm going to let that drain out for a few, see if we can get most of the brake fluid out. Before we go all hog wild and start disconnecting all the really big pieces back here, we actually have to disconnect the rear drive shaft. The rear drive shaft is connected to this U-joint and this U-joint. What I would recommend doing, and hopefully you watch this before you do it, is to do this before you take the wheels off. Because I found what happens is this spins freely. There's nothing holding it in place. So you have to either do it before you take the wheels off and use the tension of the wheels on the ground, or you need to put some kind of a vise or bar that keeps the wheels from rotating into place so that you can get enough tension or enough torque on these things to actually unscrew them. That's what I learned earlier. So, like I had said many times before, learn from my mistakes, make your job easier. Whoa, what happened? Okay, the battery on my camera died, so as a result, I went through, took the whole thing off, and I have nothing to show for it. So, to try and make myself feel better and not let down my entire thousands and thousands of viewers on my CJ7 channel, I'm going to show you what happened. The drive shaft is held in by 4 of these C-shaped brackets. Each one of these brackets has 2 3/8 head bolts that hold them into place. Just like this here. So it's really easy to get these things out. There's not a lot of tension on them, not a lot of torque. And all you have to do is back these things out, take these off, and these are on both sides, the top and the bottom of the drive shaft. When you do this, whether you disconnect the top or the front or the back first, make sure that you don't let it just drop, because it's still going to be holding into the U-joint on these 2 holding brackets, and you could possibly bend your drive shaft, you could possibly bend your holding bracket, or you could possibly torque up your U-joint to the point where it's very difficult to get out. So there you have it. There's your drive shaft. I want to give you a real close-up view of this. On each one of the U-joints pivot points on the drive shaft, there is this interesting retaining ring. You can get a special pair of pliers to get these if you really want or just take a pair of needle nose pliers, squeeze these 2 things together like this. So fine. Be a pain in the ass. Be a pain in the ass. Got my handy dandy little oil can here with my concoction of 50% transmission fluid and 50% acetone. This winds up being a great loosening agent. Apparently not. I'm going to try another method. My other method is as technical as a caveman. Just take a hammer, chisel, some kind of screwdriver, just try and break off the element of that rust enough to where it loosens up, and you should be able to pull it straight out. But the thing's all nice and greased up now, so there. Just like that. So I mean by an interesting pin. Now you'll have to somehow press this out. I'm going to use a hammer with a socket to kind of pop these things out. But these things essentially just come right off. And you can take a look at what kind of shape they're in. I'm going to replace the U-joints on all of this. These actually have, mine has the greasable ones. I think I would recommend doing that. So the next step is to pop these out. I'm going to get this other retaining ring out. Then we'll take a socket set or a socket head and see if we can punch these things through without bending anything in the metal of the shaft. Now, let's take out the U-joints. You can just pop the caps off these. Popping caps. Especially if you're going to replace these. But you can see how there's a distortion in the color, and these things have got grooves down in the metal. They're pretty well worn. You can do one of 2 things. At least on the CJ7, you can use a 17 millimeter socket, and it fits right nicely inside of that area. Or you can go get a ball joint press, the big C-clamp that has the hole on the end, and you can push that through. So if you want to go out and rent one of those from AutoZone or Advanced Auto or whoever, you can do that. I'm just going to do it the old school way, because I don't think I'm going to cause too much damage to this. I just want to make sure that I've got everything nice and open as I push this through. Far enough to where it won't go any farther. That's about it. Then you should be able to take a pair of pliers. If vice grips and pull this out. It's something that's got some nice, good tension to it. If you've already popped this through, then you should be able to work this thing out little by little. There you go. You can see all the little pins that go in this thing. They're basically bearing pins. Now, I need to pop this thing through the other end with the socket so that I can pull out the other piece. There we go. Felt it pop right through. Pull that out. At that point, should be able to just take this thing through, rotate it out, and there we have our dilapidated, soon to be replaced U-joint. Alright, let's get nasty. Let's take off the shocks. From my assessment, the top nut is 3/4. On the leaf spring support plate, well, that sucker is on there. Now that was a lot easier. There you have your shock remover. Looks like we're getting new shocks. Give you a little bit better view on this side. Huh. There, I took that off. Basically, the only thing that's holding this thing on is very well-worn rubber bushing. Shock number 2.